Gigantopithecus, the brutal giant, that no one could stop. Imagine a forest so dense that not even sunlight escapes properly. The smell of moss, rotten wood, and humidity fills the air. You walk through the dry leaves, each step creaking as if the forest itself were grumbling. Suddenly, you see it. On the ground, in the middle of the trail, a footprint. Not a bear's, not a moose's, something much, much bigger. The footprint is almost a meter long, with fingers as wide as bananas at a fair and deep enough for you to bury your entire forearm in. The kind of footprint that shouldn't exist. And that, if you're smart, is the signal to turn around and run as fast as you can. This is the first clue the modern world would have of Gigantopithecus, the largest primate that ever existed. A creature so monumental that if you put a modern Bigfoot next to it, the poor thing would look like a poorly made Ewok cosplay. Standing over 3 meters tall and weighing almost 600 kilos of muscle, Gigantopithecus was not just a giant primate. It was a living wall, a fortress of flesh, bones, and bad temper. But the craziest thing is how this creature emerged from the black hole of history. It wasn't at an epic archaeological site, with researchers excavating mysterious caves or using drones in forbidden forests. It was in something much more mundane, a Chinese pharmacy in the 1930s. There, among jars of medicinal herbs, ground tiger bones, and pills of dubious origin, they sold pieces of fossilized bones called dragon bones, supposedly miraculous for curing back pain and even lack of potency. But a German paleontologist named G.H.R. von Königswald, curious by nature, decided to examine these medicinal miracles. Among the fragments, he found nothing less than a giant jaw, with teeth as wide as bottle caps, perfectly adapted to crush bamboo like someone chewing a snack. There, on a dusty shelf, was born the greatest primate legend in history. But the story doesn't stop there. Some evidence suggests that Gigantopithecus didn't just stay in the Asian forests. There are theories, half crazy, half brilliant, that this colossus could have crossed Beringia, that frozen land bridge between Asia and North America. If that's true, this monster may have left its footprints in the forests of Alaska. And if it did, who's to say that the last of them really disappeared? Because extinction is just a fancy scientific term. In a practice, what really disappears is our ability to see what's hidden between the trees. Thousands of years ago, long before there were borders, flags, or cheap low-cost flights, Asia and North America were not separated by the Bering Strait. Instead, there was a colossal land corridor called Beringia, a natural bridge that connected 2 continents, transforming what is now Alaska into a sort of prehistoric gateway. It was along this route that entire herds of mammoths, woolly rhinos, and monstrous bison made the first transcontinental backpacking trip in history. And according to some theories, which range from scientific to completely insane, Gigantopithecus may have been part of this epic migration, and it makes sense. The temperate forests of Asia and Beringia were an all-you-can-eat place of bamboo, fruits, and dense vegetation. The perfect habitat for a primate that was 10 feet tall, as heavy as an American pickup truck, and as hungry as its size. And considering that primates aren't exactly afraid to explore new territory when their stomachs are growling, the crossing of Beringia is more than plausible. It's almost an uncomfortable certainty. Now, imagine prehistoric Alaska, not the touristy Alaska of today, full of fishing huts and influencers forging artificial wildlife, I'm talking about an apocalyptic Alaska, with forests so dense that sunlight barely touched the ground. The kind of place where a Gigantopithecus, with its arms as thick as logs and the strength to uproot small trees out of sheer boredom, would reign supreme. And it wasn't just the perfect climate or vegetation. The lack of direct competitors also played into its hands. Short-faced bears, giant wolves, and even saber-toothed cats would have thought twice about taking on a 10-foot-high wall of fur with the patience of a rhino and the strength of a crane. But the most disturbing part of this theory? Some fragmented fossils found in Alaskan caves, especially near the coast, have an uncomfortably familiar shape. Huge jaws, teeth worn down from chewing tough vegetation, and a bone structure that doesn't look like a bear. Skeptics say it's a coincidence, but if there's one thing prehistory has taught us, it's that when a monstrous creature can exist, it probably did. If Gigantopithecus did indeed make it to North America, it didn't as a tourist. He came as the owner of the whole damn thing. And maybe, just maybe, some of his descendants never left here. If you think a mountain gorilla is the definition of brute strength, it's because you haven't officially met Gigantopithecus yet, the biological version of a fur-covered demolition truck. Forget that good-natured primate with the chest-thumping grin. Gigantopithecus was an industrial-scale monster, the largest land primate that ever existed, and every bit of its body was a piece of evolutionary machinery designed to dominate its environment. Starting with its height, 10 feet, which meant it could face an NBA basketball hoop head-on and still have a head to spare. As for its weight, a comfortable 1,100 to 1,300 pounds, the equivalent of an adult grizzly bear in bulk mode, or a minivan full of Americans returning from a barbecue. But size isn't everything. Gigantopithecus's body wasn't just bulky, it was functionally brutal. Its long, incredibly muscular arms, easily reaching over 6 feet in span, were designed to rip apart trunks, topple trees, and possibly crush anything stupid enough to enter its territory. Its broad chest provided a traction force capable of turning smaller rocks and clearing clearings by simply shouting. And its jaw, a masterpiece of herbivorous destruction. With thick, flat teeth adapted to crush bamboo like toothpicks, it could chew through entire stalks that even elephants wouldn't dare eat. But this specialization came at a high price. Fossils show incredible wear and tear, indicating that every meal was a battle with its own food. But wait, because the industrial strength mouth was just the beginning. The massive jaw also had room for an extra set of powerful muscles, ensuring a bite force that rivaled that of modern crocodiles. Want a visual comparison? If a gorilla today has the strength to break an antelope's bone, Gigantopithecus could break a small tree with the same ease. And if you think all this was just to eat leaves, I'm sorry to inform you. With its size and strength, Gigantopithecus probably didn't shy away from a fight. With its size and testosterone levels, anything that invaded its space became a biological carpet. Bears, tigers, and even groups of hominids learned quickly. If it crossed its path, it either ran or dug its own grave. The result was a primate so disproportionate, so out of the ordinary, that its mere existence is an affront to evolutionary common sense. It was a real-life King Kong, only without the plot of a novel, and luckily for our ancestors, nature ended up pulling the plug before it discovered its taste for human flesh. Or did it really? Every fossil tells a story, but Gigantopithecus left an entire book open with missing pages scribbled on and full of theoretical blood, because no one knows for sure. Was this furry colossus just a peaceful bamboo eater or a territorial tank with zero patience and enough strength to rewrite the food chain? The most direct evidence, its teeth, points to peace. They are giant, flat, with the typical wear and tear of someone who spent the day chewing bamboo and tough vegetation. Think of a panda, but with twice the mouth and a much worse mood. For a long time, this was the dominant view, a vegetarian giant, more interested in demolishing bushes than killing neighbors. But the story doesn't end so nicely. First, because life is not a fixed menu. In times of scarcity, large primates get creative. And if the forests started to disappear, Gigantopithecus may have found a way to supplement its diet. Fresh carcasses, small animals, even the young of rivals. Everything is on the menu when hunger strikes and the bamboo evaporates. Second, there's the size and temperament factor. At 3 meters tall and weighing half a ton, this animal didn't move lightly. Each step was a local geological event. And a primate of this size, territorial by nature, wasn't going to give hugs to any intruder. Entered its territory, it would be slaps, bites, and body throws until only silence remained. And this isn't just a guess. Today, gorillas, our peaceful cousins, are already capable of beating predators and even killing them. Now, imagine this same behavior in a creature the size of a van, with more testosterone than a CrossFit gym. Bears, tigers, even small groups of hominids. No one came out unscathed from an argument with the owner of the bamboo grove. The result is an animal that may never have actively hunted, but that was also not afraid to solve problems with a fist, especially when the invaders were smaller, slower, or simply unlucky. So, the verdict? Gigantopithecus was probably a vegetarian, but not the friendly activist t-shirt kind. He was the kind who ate leaves because he liked them, but crushed skulls because he needed them. He needed a hypertrophied pacifist with the diplomacy of a jackhammer, and nature, as always, didn't let this temperament go unnoticed. If you think the largest primate in history was discovered with pomp and impeccable scientific method, you don't know the real science. Gigantopithecus didn't emerge from an epic excavation full of researchers with paintbrushes and drones mapping caves. It turned up in a place as epic as a Chinese pharmacy, the 1930s. Traditional medicine stores sold everything: ground horns, tiger bones, imaginary dragon down, and among them fossilized bone fragments, sold as dragon bones. They were ground up and served as a miracle cure for pain, infertility, or any other problem that the newly invented medicine decided to cure. But a German paleontologist, G.H.R. von Königswald, decided that those bones weren't from any damn dragon. Among the fragments, he found something much more impressive: teeth and a colossal jawbone larger than any known primate. There it was, hidden in the middle of the miraculous dust, the first proof of the existence of a true primate wall. But the story only gets crazier, because to this day, Gigantopithecus fossils are not found like in a pretty National Geographic documentary. They continue to appear completely randomly, in isolated caves, in private collections, in fossil black markets where eccentric billionaires buy jaws like they buy rare wine. And then comes the really uncomfortable part. In some caves in Alaska and the Yukon, regions that were part of ancient Beringia, Archaeologists have found fragments of giant jaws and teeth that do not match any known animal from the region. At first, they thought they were from ancient bears, but the shape, the wear on the teeth, and the size, they are very similar to the remains of Asian Gigantopithecus. Of course, no one is 100% sure, because to admit this would be to open the door to the greatest plot twist in American paleontology, the possibility that Gigantopithecus not only crossed the Bering Bridge, but colonized parts of North America, living among mammoths, dire wolves, and early humans. Was it just a coincidence? Or is there a real chance that some of these gigantic footprints that still appear today in remote forests are echoes of a species that never truly accepted its extinction? Every giant creature has a built-in expiration date. Gigantopithecus, even though it was a living wall of muscle and fur, was no exception to this universal rule. Its extinction was not a single spectacular event, like a meteor or a supervolcano. It was a series of climatic, ecological, and, of course, human blows. Each blow took another bite out of this colossus's sovereignty. First came the nasty weather. Lush tropical forests began to wither, giving way to drier, less friendly environments for a compulsive bamboo eater. For a creature that needed tons of vegetation every day, that was like cutting off the power supply to an entire city. It might have had strength, size, and a jaw that could chew through logs, but it can't chew through what's gone. Then came the worst pest ever invented, us. Early hominids began to invade Gigantopithecus's territory, small, puny, but incredibly annoying. They carried spears, knew how to light fires, and most importantly, they worked in groups. One Gigantopithecus could easily crush a lone hunter, but a dozen armed, coordinated, and risk-taking hominids were another matter. And to make matters worse, Gigantopithecus was a premium target. With half a ton of meat, skin, and fat, taking one down meant weeks of luxury protein for an entire tribe. It was the difference between surviving the winter or becoming bear food. Even though it was a colossus that could uproot trees and break bones with a punch, it was just another item on the menu for the hungry early humans. The fossil record becomes increasingly scarce as time passes. What was once a widespread distribution begins to shrink. The last Gigantopithecus were probably confined to isolated caves, hidden in pockets of forest that still had enough bamboo to sustain their enormous appetites. The final extinction was silent, almost bureaucratic. The last of them probably did not die in an epic battle, but simply starved to death, surrounded by a world that had become too small to support such a gigantic body and such an insatiable hunger. But what if they weren't all gone? Because between the last fossil and the first legends of furry, giant beings observed by human tribes, there is an uncomfortable void. A void where extinction and survival merge. Maybe Gigantopithecus died out, or maybe it just learned to hide better. Every culture has its favorite furry monster. In the United States, he goes by the name of Bigfoot, the elusive primate of the forests of the Northwest. In the mountains of Asia, he becomes the Yeti, the white ghost of the Himalayas. And in Siberia, he is Almasty, a more compact but equally uncomfortable version. 3 continents, 3 different creatures, or is it just the same evolutionary ghost that has been haunting humanity since prehistoric times? Because when you line up these reports, the feeling is that all these creatures are cultural echoes of the same real being. Gigantopithecus itself, think about it. huge bipedal creatures covered in hair that avoid humans but leave footprints the size of frying pans, dense forests, remote mountains, inaccessible caves, and reports of brief encounters where the description uncomfortably matches the largest primate ever recorded. Coincidence? Perhaps. But some American legends add another layer of discomfort. Several Native American tribes have ancient stories about hairy giants that roam the forests and mountains. The Salish in the Northwest speak of Sasquatch. The Lummi have tales of enormous beings that reek of rotting flesh and leave impossible footprints. These legends did not emerge from ghost hunting TV shows. They date back to before Europeans set foot on the continent, from a time when oral memory was the only encyclopedia available. What if these stories were not just folklore? What if they were preserved memories of real encounters, of Native American hunters crossing paths with the last surviving Gigantopithecus, refugees in forests that modern man has never been able to fully explore? To date, no one has found a complete fossil of Gigantopithecus in the Americas, but fragments of bones, jaws, and teeth found in caves in Alaska and Canada raise uncomfortable questions. They look too old to be any known species, but too young to be just geological flukes. Science calls this a fossil coincidence. But what if it's not a coincidence? What if every unexplained footprint, every scream echoing through a forest, every shaky footage of a huge bipedal shadow among the trees is a reminder that some extinctions are less definitive than we like to believe? Because Gigantopithecus may be gone from the books. But what if it never really left the scene? Every good extinction story has a gap, a blank space between the last confirmed fossil and the first witnesses swearing that something giant, hairy, and smelling like a damp graveyard still walks the forest. With Gigantopithecus, that gap is wide enough to fit a bus, and full of questions that science would rather not answer. What if it never disappeared entirely? What if, instead of disappearing, it adapted? The forests of the American Northwest, Alaska, and remote parts of Canada form a green labyrinth where humans have barely scratched the surface. Vast, trackless territories where the only sound is the wind and the snap of branches under unseen feet. Areas so dense and inhospitable that you could hide an entire army, or a handful of relict primates very good at avoiding contact. Every giant footprint found, every report of a furry humanoid with glowing eyes, every deep cry echoing in dark forests is just more fuel to this uncomfortable fire. Because even with all the technology, satellites, and drones, the interior of these forests remains a biological black hole, where modern science has less control than it likes to admit. If Gigantopithecus survived, it is no longer that 1,300-pound monster that showed off and destroyed. It may have shrunk, adapted its body to the cold and scarcity. Perhaps it learned to hide, to move silently, to avoid clearance and humans. But even with adaptations, a giant primate doesn't disappear completely. It leaves tracks. And these tracks could be what we now call Bigfoot, not as a separate or supernatural species, but as the result of the forced evolution of a prehistoric colossus that learned the hard way that its greatest enemy is not nature, but rather Homo sapiens. Whether it's a legend or a fragment of truth, one thing is certain. Gigantopithecus once dominated entire forests, and if it, or something genetically very close to it, still lurks among the trees, true extinction could be the certainty that it has disappeared. So the next time you enter a deep forest, hear branches breaking above your head and feel that uncomfortable sensation of being watched. Remember, the greatest predator is the one that knows how to wait. Did you like the video? So subscribe to the channel, like it, and comment below. Do you think Bigfoot is just a legend, or is he the last breath of Gigantopithecus?